Nothing we say is investment advice. Please pause on all 3 pages of this disclaimer and read it.
Greetings, Algo artists. Welcome to the Sunday weekly market preview. We're going to take a look today at Bitcoin, Solana, EURUSD, GBPUSD, USDJPY, SP500 Futures, Dow Jones Futures, NASDAQ Futures, gold, and silver. And we're going to start with the economic data. Going to be probably a pretty big week on Monday, about an hour after the European Open. We have a lot of PMI data starting with France, and then we have the German data. We have the British pound data shortly thereafter, and then the US PMI, this Purchasing Managers Index data, comes out the next morning. Now, most of that will probably affect the currency markets. The US data might affect the US stock market. We do have some more items coming out from Canada. Governor Macklem will speak. That could move the Canadian dollar, the loonie, and then the European Open on Tuesday morning is going to be the claimant count change. That's unemployment data, mostly going to affect the British pound. The next morning, about an hour before the New York Open, we're going to have the Canadian CPI data coming out. That'll affect the loonie. And then we have some sales data coming out for USD, which of course USD items can affect stock markets as a whole. Just depends on how far off the estimate is from the actual, right? And then the next European Open for Wednesday morning, we have GBP CPI coming out, going to affect the pound. And then we have a big day on Wednesday. So chances are the markets will slow down Wednesday morning, maybe even Tuesday night for USD and for stock markets, and maybe even markets as a whole. We've got the federal funds rate, FOMC. They're going to talk about the interest rate. It's the big day. This is probably the first or second biggest economic data announcement that comes out for the US dollar. Now, there have been some rumblings out there that we might see a bit stronger of a cut than expected. We know that the Swiss did a 50 basis point cut. That's a 0.5%, which is pretty big. And there are a lot of whispers out there of possible deflationary issues. They're always talking about inflation, but the reality is that the market's been held up in a bit of an artificial way. And so it might be that the market is due for a correction. And so they may be cutting rates ahead of that to try to avoid too strong of a correction. It might work, it might not, and it might not happen. We're going to see. And then we have some data, the Kiwi GDP coming out at 4:45 p.m. EST. Now, the tricky thing about Wednesday, this might be the biggest, most impactful news, as big as FOMC, maybe smaller, maybe a little bit bigger, but the JPY policy rate is going to come out, their monetary policy statement. If you look back towards August, we had a massive pullback because they decided to go ahead and hike their rates for the first time in 20 years. Actually, August was the second time they had hiked their rates for the first time in 20 years, 2 months before that, and then again 2 months later in August. And this had a large impact on markets. And I've done shows all about it. I'll put a link up in the corner here talking about why that mattered, why the market fell so hard when that happened. And they've said they're going to do it again. They didn't do it last month. They may do it this month. So the trickiest part about trading when this is on the menu here, when it's on the docket, is that they don't tell you when they're going to say it. It's tentative. So they might do it just at any time of the day. It might happen the next day. So trading in Wednesday is super tricky. If I were going to trade Wednesday, I probably would be scalping with stops to entry very quickly, or maybe just take that day and backtest and prepare and study and do other stuff. Now, Thursday, we have the British pound monetary policy summary, same thing. We've got the bank rate and all that type of stuff. And then we have the US GDP at 8:30 a.m. EST, an hour before the market opens. And then European Open on Friday, we've got retail sales data for GBP. The next morning, 8:30 a.m. EST, is Canadian sales data. And then we have an inflation metric that actually could be a bit more impactful than people recognize. Everybody looks at CPI, but the PCE price index is probably just as important. And if the forecast is really different from the actual, this could profoundly affect markets around the world. So let's jump into the charts. And we'll start with Bitcoin, as we do. It's just Bitcoin is really what everybody's watching right now. So we'll start there and look at this box that I drew. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this box. And the reason that we pointed this out is because I've been watching Bitcoin and charting it since 2017. There are those who feel that I might have a better handle on Bitcoin than many or most people. People say that. Don't want to sit here and toot my own horn, but it is what it is. When you see this candle right here that I have in the middle of this box, this weird looking candle with the long wick to the top, long wick to the bottom, and if you look on a lower time frame, you'll see this is just market madness. It's hard wicks up, hard wicks down, and what it is it's shaking off a lot of leverage. And we tend to see this before a big move up. I've watched it many times. I've seen it too many times. I've talked about it. This is a typical shake-off candle before price moves up. And so price has been moving up. And if you look at the magenta path. These are the paths I drew the prior week, and I held on to those just so you can see that I'm pretty darn accurate. It didn't head up when I thought it would. Initially, it did take my second path up. I was concerned there might be a pullback for liquidity, and pullback there was, but it happened before I thought it might happen. So it looks like price is going to head up right now, and it looks like it's going to continue. I did have a possible move down to low 90s or even high 80s or even high 70s, and that still could happen. But right now, looking at the charts, looking at everything I'm seeing, my primary thesis is that price will head up to touch 108. It's already moved up to touch 106.5. Actually, it happened today. And so price could easily run up and hit 108 and maybe even 113 in the next week. I did push this out a couple of weeks. I made this forecast a little bit farther than I usually do. I usually only forecast for a week. I expect 108, but price could FOMO up to 113 by the end of this week. Now, Solana has been pretty stable, doing what I thought it would do. This, let me go ahead and correct these and make these magenta so you know it's my past predictions, which are darn accurate. And this one up here, I won't change it. The far left one is my prediction for the week before. I've been dead on with Solana. Last week, it did go a bit lower than I thought it would. I thought it would be held up around 220. It moved down all the way to 200, grab some liquidity, and it may very well go up from here. The thing about Solana is that when Bitcoin is running hard, the alts tend to kind of dry out, and Solana hasn't really been an exception to that. But as Bitcoin slows down, Solana can really start to catch up hard. So if Bitcoin heads up and keeps heading up, then Solana probably will head up, but it'll be held back probably just a little bit while money is going into Bitcoin. When Bitcoin finally slows down, Solana is a decent candidate for the next coin that is going to go, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see a $300 Solana by the end of this cycle, which I think will end anytime between January and June or July. EURUSD. So I had projected this going a little bit higher, but it just doesn't have the guts to do it. I don't expect it at the moment to head up to where this magenta arrow said. I do expect to see what I drew here with the yellow arrow. I think it is going to try to pop up a little bit, but if you look at the high time frame algos, they are rather bearish. I think it's going to knock its head on what appears to be this range, this rectangle that I just expanded out. I think it's going to probably follow that range, maybe go a little bit higher and touch that, but eventually I think it'll break down. Now it could break up though. The way that the algos are is that high time frame it is bearish, but understand that it is like a spring load. It's like holding a cork underwater. Now you can push the cork deeper underwater, but eventually it's going to want to pop back up. For the moment though, I do expect it to knock its head on about $1.06 and then head down, but we'll see. And if this doesn't happen, I will change my projections. But for the very short term, the next few days, I expect it to slowly move up and approach the high 105s to 106. British pound. British pound does have some buy and sell pressure, so I do expect it to continue to range a bit. It could eke up from here as I kind of drew with this dotted line, but there is a fair amount of sell pressure too. So really what I'm expecting is price to sort of flop around in a range, and I think that range is going to look like so. It's hard to say right now. This is a tough one to predict. This range could also go a bit deeper. Just going to have to kind of wait and see on this one and scalp. I don't want to give too strong of a prediction. It's just in a kind of a no man's land. It could even head down and bottom out at 125, but there's enough pressure to where I think it wouldn't be a straight line. Even if it broke downwards, I think it would head like this. And I'm going to make this a dotted line because I'm just not that confident in any of my assessments for the pound right now. It's a funky look right now. It could do a lot of things. So we're going to leave that one behind. As this one starts to shape up, I'll amend it on my daily shows this week. Now, JPY is showing strong. The dollar is showing strong. There's one thing that we have to look at with the Swiss franc having its rates cut at a surprise 50 basis points last week. The reason they did that cut is because a lot of capital went to the Swiss franc because that's where a lot of money goes during safety. And a lot of the market seems to think some deflation is coming, that the market might actually drop sometime in the future. Might not be right away, might be a few months, might be tomorrow, you never know. But when money starts to flow towards the franc, and it has to do with some prices going down, there's a little bit of deflation going on out there. And what you'll see in that scenario is that the dollar will often act the same. And the USD as on the front of the JPY pair may push price up. So this is what I expect. A move up, maybe a pullback, and it's going to probably approach 156.80 this week. May or may not hit it, but it's probably going to approach that. I expect sideways action with the SP500. In fact, we might see a range build in this area. This is another asset where I'm not quite as confident right now. I'm going to take a look at it. I do think we're going to see sideways price action. It just depends on whether or not the plunge protection team wants to do what it did a couple of weeks ago and make sure that it's holding prices up like it did right here, or at least I'm assuming that's what they did. I can't know for sure, but that's very plunge protection-y in this area. That's what it looks like. So as price moves, I'm going to go ahead and amend this on the weekly shows, but I do expect price to slowly move to the right, maybe a little down, maybe a little up, maybe develop a range. We're going to see. Now, Dow Jones, I expect to possibly grab some liquidity at the top of this prior structure, right here, the top of this box in that area. I do think price will bounce off of that. Just like everything else, I will correct my assessment as the markets wear on, but I do think we're going to see a little sideways, grab some liquidity, and possibly bounce upwards. The indices have been strong. It is time for the Santa rally. We'll see if we even get it, but that's what I expect for now. NASDAQ has gone full rocket ship. The thing has just continued up. It's hit my target. It's gone beyond. I do think we're going to see 21,900 or even 22,000 possibly by the end of the week. Nothing goes up forever. There tends to be pullbacks. We're going to see how that goes. But right now, everything says bullish on this. Now, gold ended up doing what I thought, more or less. It just pumped up, and I think that might have been the surprise Swiss franc move that caused this to move like it did. There was also the Syria conflict. So I do think gold is going to continue to move sideways like this. I think overall gold does need to cool off a little bit, but in the end, gold has been strong, probably will continue to be strong for a period of time. I expect sideways action, maybe a little bit of a liquidity grab, possibly down in this sort of 25.50 area, or it's just going to stay above the line in this box. And when I say that line, I mean the bottom of the box at 26.20. So it may stay above 26.20 and just bounce around in this box. We're going to see how that goes as well. As it stands right now, the high time frame does need to cool off a bit, but it might be the price is held up by forces. Silver, as we talked about, it did end up doing what I thought it would as well. I think we had the surprise move up either due to Syria or Swiss franc. As the market digested whichever that was, it headed back down, and I think it's going to revisit 29.80, possibly bounce around in that same range that we talked about a couple of days ago. It's an exciting week. It's the end of the year. When you come to the end of the calendar year, you have a lot of unexpected price action. And the reason that might be is that you have very large players holding price in a certain area or pushing price in a different area because their options may be expiring or they may need their quarterly numbers to look a certain way. And that would be like a collective group. I'm not talking about 1, 2, or 5 guys with cigars in a room necessarily. I'm talking about a lot of institutions who probably have a similar view of the markets, and they may just be doing what they have to do to keep things where they have to go. So price can move a little unexpectedly, but in the near term, if you're like a day trader or even a swing trader, there are profits to be made towards the end of the year. FX markets do get a little bit slow. It is what it is. So if you want to learn how I make these predictions, if you want to learn how I'm able to extract money from these markets, come to algofactory.tech. Learn to trade like a hedge fund pro. We teach you the business of trading. We teach you how grown-ups trade. We teach you what needs to be done in order to be a successful trader. There was a client who contacted me about 2 weeks ago. He says, "Hey, I have to leave Algo Factory." I said, "Really? Is everything okay?" He said, "Oh, no, it's great." He says, "I came in here and I took about 4 months and you fixed all my trading." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, I've been trading for years, as you know, and I just had some issues. I wasn't profitable. I came in, followed your system, got profitable, and I'm good." I said, "That's awesome." So I might actually have him on one of the shows coming up. But either way, Algo Factory is great if you're already a trader, if you're a new trader too. Either way, come over, algofactory.tech. Learn to trade like a hedge fund pro, and we will see you on Tuesday morning for the live show.